morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone listening to the podcast everywhere in the world. This is the Thoughts of the Ash. It's a little bit past 10 on a quiet night here in Pasig. Some of the nights like this, when the city slows down, gets a little bit quieter. It's the perfect time for a little bit of reflection, aren't they? And also, have you ever felt somewhat disconnected? Like you don't know where you're going in your own life? Also, not being sure of the story you were supposed to be creating? Frequently asking yourself which side of an ending of the story you belong to, where you truly came from, what your academic struggles truly mean, and where you are supposed to be going. Now, imagine that feeling of an entire scale, of an entire people, an archipelago of millions, being taught continuously for centuries that their history began with their Spanish conquerors, the colonizers, that their present was somewhat of a gift that they should be grateful for. Their future was not their own to decide, even. This was the spiritual crisis of the early Filipino people in the late 19th century. And into that crisis walked a man that we think we know so well, being taught at classes at every university, at every school, whether it's public or private. We know who he is. It's Dr. Jose Rizal. We see his monuments everywhere in the world. We celebrate the holidays that's dedicated for him. But for tonight, I want you to think of him not as a monument or even a statue, but as an architect. Specifically, what kind of an architect? And the architect of a nation's memory. How, you may ask? Using a framework that historian Zeus Salazar would later call the tripartite view of Philippine history. Jose Rizal gave us a story to finally call our own. To build a house, you need a foundation. For a nation spirit, that foundation is of a dignified past. The narrative of the Spanish was simple. We were just savages in a state of darkness, or a dilim, for sure, until they brought the light of civilization. Jose Rizal knew this, that this was a lie. His first great act as our first architect was to dig for our original foundation. He, he did this with this painstaking that, according to Dr. Antonio Moria's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, he didn't just write a new history book, because that would have been dismissed. Instead, he took the work of a high-ranking Spanish official from 1609, in the year 1609, and used it as a mirror. Through his notes, Rizal proved that, using the colonizers' own evidence, that even before the Spanish galleon trade had ever appeared on the horizon, before the Spanish fully conquered the Philippines and establishing the 300-year rule, had a thriving civilization, although not as a single country, but different barangays, kingdoms, and sultanates. We had laws, we had international trade. Of course, we're in Asia, you know, and a system of writing. A good example of it is the bye-bye, and also a vibrant culture, different ones to say the least. Through that, Jose Rizal gave us back our liwanag or light, the pre-colonial light, and he also laid the foundation. But with the foundation secure, the architect had to survey, he had to diagnose the sickness of his present time during the time that he was alive. But this came, his second greatest act. However, it came in the form of his two novels. His first, No Limitangere. It was his diagnosis of the social cancer of society back then in the past. He didn't just tell the story, he dissected it. He dissected the rotten tissues of his society back then. The abusive power of the friars, the corruption of every Spanish official that was in the Philippines. And also he looked at the suffering of every ordinary Filipino, like Sisa and their sons. It was painful, of course, and looking unflinched at the darkness, the dilim that had consumed the very nation. And if Noli Me Tangere was his diagnosis, we should take a look at his second novel, El Filibusterismo. This is the grim prognosis. This should be called the reign of greed, a warning of what happens when a society is pushed to its absolute limit. How? You may ask. Of course, we have to look the tragic figure of Simon. Jose Rizal showed that this darkness, if left untreated, would inevitably lead to violent, a desperate rage. It was a dark, bitter, and the necessary truth. So he gave us a proud past, and he diagnosed our sick present. But an architect doesn't just point out the problems, he draws up the plans for a new structure that was going to be built. This is the third act of his Rizal, charting the course for the future. According to the research, the Philippines a century hence. He lays it all out. He speaks directly to Spain, warning them that a people that has rediscovered their history and are fully aware of their suffering during their reign cannot be oppressed forever. He tells them, give us the reforms that we need. Give us the dignity that we need. Or we will create our future ourselves. He was starting a path to a muling liwanag, a re-enlightenment, a new dawn that was ours to make. Therefore, Jose Rizal gave us a past, a present, and a future. A complete story even. Now, you might be thinking to yourselves, that's a pretty powerful idea. Albeit it was, but it was so powerful. Matter of fact, that more than 60 years after Rizal's death, the nation was almost torn apart just by the question of whether or not students should be required to read these very books. If not the books, the overall courses itself. As we dig into the work of John Schumacher in the Rizal Bill of 1956, made by Horacio de la Costa and the bishops, the debate when the time that the bill was passed, it was fierce. The very act of teaching Filipinos after its independence from the Spanish, the Americans, and the Japanese. This very act, this very bill of teaching Filipinos, us, to see our own history through Jose Rizal's lens, was considered dangerous by some of the most powerful institutions in the country. And that was the legacy. Jose Rizal's project was so revolutionary that it remains controversial. He gave us an identity that was so potent that we are still, to this day, in the year 2025, arguing about how do we handle it. The overall of his life, how should we look into his life, looking into his works. However, so for tonight, as the quiet noises, the white noises, or whether it's raining everywhere in the country, everywhere in the world, feeling the snow. However, the story Jose Rizal that built for us is more than just a history lesson. It's a tool. He gave us the blueprint to understand ourselves, the pride of our liwanag, enduring the painful lessons of our dilim, the darkness, and the enduring hope for our muling liwanag, the re-enlightenment. However, this is the question that Jose Rizal left for us, the contemporary world, the contemporary Filipinos. Then, this isn't just about what he wrote. This isn't just about the history. It's about what do we do as the modern Filipinos with the memory that he helped us reclaim. You might even ask yourselves, personally for me, how do we today, how do we build about the foundation he rediscovered? That's just a question that I will leave for tonight. This is the Thoughts of the Ash. I'm your host. Well, my name is Ash, and I'm your host. Always be curious. Always be thoughtful. And good night.